Hi everyone, it's William. This is the 4th of July 2025, so if you're American, I hope you're enjoying the day, and I hope you're also bearing in mind the irony given what's going on in our country these days. Anyway, enough about that. This is the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series. We're doing 1915 today. And for our recap, well, in the previous video, which was 1939, it was kind of a repeat of what had happened to Dmitri in 1921 after he returned from his disastrous visit to Berlin and getting together with various political figures there. This time it's a reaction within the emigre community to him making public anti-Nazi statements. And yeah, 1915 is what I'm trying to think of. Our previous 1915 diary entry, Dmitri returned to Usovo and started reading Le Démon de Midi, the noontime demon, you could say, in English, although unfortunately the book has not been translated into English. I just found that out. And yeah, I bring that up because it figures again in today's diary entry. Our cast, well, we just have a brief mention of Maria. Laming is there in Usovo, but otherwise Dmitri is pretty much by himself. So we are up to the 16th/29th of January in Usovo, and it's 2 degrees above freezing, again with some snow and some rain, or some rain mixed with snow. Okay, funny, isn't it? Because one always thinks of Russia in January as being just heaps and heaps of snow, and I think there was plenty. I mean, he was able to go sledding and go skiing, but yeah, already the weather is above freezing, at least for a while, and you have some rain as well as snow. All right, here we go. I got up only around 12 o'clock. Though I slept pretty well, I couldn't wake up this morning. This strange illness drags on, frightful diarrhea 10 to 15 times a day, despite the fact that I gave up the arsenic drops a long time ago. I lay in bed and read until it was time for lunch, which was at 1 o'clock, à deux with GM. Then we went out with rifles, but didn't see anything. I returned home around 5 o'clock, and we had tea. Then I wrote a few words to Maria about her arrival in Moscow and Usovo, after which I continued to read Le Démon de Midi, Volume 2 already. I like it more and more. Dinner à deux with GM at 8 o'clock, after which we sat around in my room. I read and finished the 2nd volume, then we talked until it was time for evening tea, which was at 12 o'clock. Then we went to bed. I'm bored here. I want something, but I myself don't know what. I wish I could go back to Moscow sooner, so another trip to Moscow is planned, but it's some way ahead. I think he stays 10 days in Usovo. Okay, I should just say that from the previous diary entry, when we knew that he'd written this letter to Balashova and wasn't happy with it, but he'd sent it to her, and now clearly he's waiting for her to write back. As we know also from that previous diary entry, Usovo is very close to Moscow, so it seems like the letter could have reached her that same day, not the 15th but the 16th, the diary entry we're doing today. And he actually, you recall he made this comment, I hope she doesn't reply to it, because he was so unhappy with the letter, but he also said, this is the woman I want, so kind of a contradiction there, seemingly. Okay, so he couldn't wake up in the morning. Boy, do I know that feeling. I'm sure you do too. There are some mornings where you wake up, but you don't wake up. And so, he went to bed the night before, like he said, yeah, like right after their midnight tea, which is kind of a strange concept. So he's sleeping like 10 hours and then not feeling rested when he wakes up, even though he's not aware of having, had any issues with sleeping, like waking up or anything like that, or not being able to fall asleep. Anyway, then he talks about this strange illness. So if it's a strange illness, then nobody has diagnosed him with anything, I guess. Is that what he means by strange? It's kind of, I'm kind of going back to the idea that it was really psychosomatic rather than that they thought he had syphilis. I don't know. Anyway, at least there's no diagnosis, at least as far as he knows, at least as far as he's been told. And he's been left in charge of his own compliance or non-compliance with the medication, the arsenic-derived medication. So diarrhea 10 or 15 times a day, and before he said, I think 16, when he previously mentioned it right before he left for Moscow. So did he have this in Moscow? He's not telling us that he didn't have it in Moscow, but my God, how could he have done anything? How could he have gone out when he was still in Usovo and spent 5 hours a day out, doing what he was doing outside with the sledding and the skiing and so on and so forth? How could he, if he had, trying to ski to Elinskaya and actually going to Elinskaya? How could he if he had diarrhea that often? Yeah, I don't know. I don't understand that. Or how could he have been going to the theater? And he must have been intimately familiar with every restroom in the Metropole Hotel and the Mali and Bolshoi theaters, unless he's just simply really exaggerating. So he had initially, quite logically, I think, associated it with the arsenic, and that was why he had stopped taking the arsenic. But now it hasn't been a long time. He says it's been a long time since he stopped taking the arsenic. Well, it's been 10 days. And the idea that arsenic could continue to have repercussions, could continue to affect your digestion after a break of 10 days does seem to me to be credible, although I don't have any expertise. I mean, God knows it could have done permanent damage, both to his kidneys and to his digestive system, and who knows what else. We do get a little bit more. We find out that he's taking arsenic drops. So usually salvarsan that they used to treat syphilis was given in the form of injections. They had experimented with pills, but hadn't found that they were stable enough. Somehow it was difficult to, in certain media, to get the right concentration and for it to be stable. That's what I gather from the reading that I've done. But I suppose if Dmitri had said, no, I'm not going to submit to injections, or simply because he was there in Usovo without a doctor, and he wasn't, they didn't want him to give his own, because these are injections into a vein, not just under the skin. So he's taking drops, and it's true that with the injection, they dissolved the arsenic in water, which way they were then injecting, if I understand that correctly. And I'm really just looking at what AI and what Wikipedia say. So it would make, if it was salvarsan, it would make more sense that it was in water in the form of drops than that it was pills. So, but I still just don't know what's going on. Apparently he doesn't either. So Le Démon de Midi, I'm fascinated by this because he has just devoured this book. He may have started reading it. You recall he was reading French novels right before he left for Moscow. I can't remember. I should go back and look, of course, if he'd started Le Démon de Midi before he left for Moscow and then was resuming it, because it's not a small book and it's 2 volumes and he's just devouring it. So he just started the 2nd volume that day and already he's finished it by midnight. Wow. So I'm making a little progress with my own reading of the book, and the very long first scene, actually the whole first chapter, I believe, is this political discussion between 2 Roman Catholic priests, and they've decided that they want a certain candidate to be sent to Parliament, and that they're going to back this candidate to the hilt. And they're discussing that, they're discussing the people that they don't want to be elected. They're discussing what they consider the virtues and the qualifications of this particular candidate. And so it's not the sort of thing that you would ordinarily think of as sort of grabbing a young man of 23 and making him just devour this book. But Dmitri was always interested in politics, and I know that from reading a summary that later on in the book, this candidate to represent the Roman Catholic point of view against anti-clericalists in the French Parliament, the Chamber of Deputies, he's going to have an affair. And that's going to cause for him all this inner turmoil. So, wow, I don't know. I'll continue to read and I will let you know if I find anything that I think, aha, so that's what Dmitri was particularly interested in. And then we have this existential problem. I want something, but I don't know what. So that's more than just being bored. He's bored. That's understandable. He's there with one other person, aside from servants, and, spending half the day in the bathroom, it sounds like, and nothing going on. So he's bored. Of course he's bored, but this is different. This statement, I want something, but I don't know what. So it's kind of like the illness itself. There's the physical illness. It's strange. I don't know what it is. And then there's this sort of existential illness. I want something, but I don't know what. So they're both very vague. And, it kind of makes sense to put them together, doesn't it? Because in both cases, he's kind of at sea. And so how related is the one to the other? And another thing that I was thinking about as I was reading this, and not related to anything that Dmitri says, but, on the subject of royalty, let's say royalty and diarrhea, so this sort of mythologized or romanticized view that a lot of times we have of royalty, and royalty is meant to be symbolic and archetypal, and that being the case, we can forgive royal persons their vices. We can forgive Dmitri his womanizing, for instance, but can we forgive his diarrhea? Because that really undercuts the whole, royalty as archetypal and as mythological. But I'm sure all of us can, because I think a lot of the people watching this, well, can I speak of a lot of anybody watching this, but you are already people in a lot of cases who have studied and researched and seriously contemplated royalty, and that, of course, that people had diarrhea and that sort of thing, and yet by and large it's probably more a sin against royal status than, being a gambler or a womanizer or anything else is. Anyway, just a thought. What do we have next time? Well, next time our letter section from Grunwald will be specifically not about Dmitri, but about Vladimir and his entourage in this ongoing struggle within the emigre community, the Russian emigre community, with World War II right there about to explode, and the emigre community, like everybody else, realizing that they're living on the razor's edge and feeling like they need to maybe start choosing sides. A lot of them already have chosen sides. And how does Vladimir, the claimant to the throne, fit into that? So then for our next 1915 diary entry, well, something interesting. Among other things, Dmitri will be reading a book about Uncle Sergei, a biography of Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich. And alas, he doesn't give us the author's name. And he's finding it very sort of dull, as opposed to Le Demande de Midi. But I won't say more about that because his comments are interesting. And wow, I really wish I could find this book. Anyway, I hope to see you next time. Bye.